Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are learning Daf Shevui, Masechet Kiddushin, page 21, Daf Kaf Aleph. And I wanted to talk briefly today about a concept, an interpretive concept, a halacha concept that comes up towards the end of the page, and that's the notion of chidush. And let me explain the context in which it comes up, and then you should be able to see what the word chidush means in this context. So the question is asked, a Israel slave, a Jewish slave, who's also a Kohen, can his master give him a Canaanite bondwoman, a female slave, as a wife? Now we know from the Torah that Hebrew slaves can be given by their masters Canaanite female slaves, even though generally speaking Jews cannot marry a Canaanite female slave. Jewish men cannot. But in that specific case they can. And the question is, does this apply to a Kohen as well? And so the question is asked, is it a chidush? A chidush in this context would mean that it's like a new law, like something that doesn't really follow the normal laws of the Torah. That's usually what chidush means. Chidush is something that you would not have been able to, let's say, derive from somewhere else. Something innovative, not in the sense that it's just sort of that it's like something we never heard of before, but that it abrogates the normal laws. In this case, it abrogates the normal laws because normally speaking, a Jew cannot marry a Canaanite slave. But in this case, he can. So if something's a chidush and it breaks the boundaries of one prohibition, it might break the boundaries of all prohibitions, in which case a Kohen who's a slave could also marry a Canaanite slave woman. Or perhaps, right, it's not a chidush and Kohanim have extra restrictions. And then the same thing comes up later on with the Yifat Tohar, with the beautiful woman taken captive during war. The question is that a chidush? Generally speaking, a Jew cannot marry or cannot have relations even with a non-Jewish woman. And in which case, if it's a chidush, it's something that, again, doesn't match the normal laws, and therefore it applies even to a Kohen. Or perhaps Kohanim remain in their normal category of having more restrictions, more specifically sexual prohibition restrictions than do regular Israelites. So that's what the word chidush usually means, and it's used in context of like sort of asking the question, can we learn from this? Or put it another way, does this law break all of the normal laws, in which case none of the normal categories or normal halachot apply to this specific case, or do they? And we don't approach it as a chidush. Just a word about the Yifat Torah. It comes up very briefly here. The Yifat Torah is there in the Torah, saying that if an Israelite on the battlefield captures a beautiful woman, he can't just treat her, can't just have basically rape her on the field. He has to take her home and make her his wife. Now, again, obviously this doesn't match something that is on our modern ethos, but the Torah is clearly battling against, and the rabbis acknowledge this, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, what men might end up doing at war in any case. And in that sense, it's a very interesting concession, if you will, saying, look, the worst case scenario is that he just rapes her and leaves her there in the field. Who knows what could happen? The Torah does not approve of that, and therefore the Torah says, look, there's a better way of doing this, even though it's clear that the rabbis, and I think the Torah itself, does not think that this is a good institution. It's not advocating for it. It's conceding that rather than allow the worst case scenario to happen, we should provide a slightly better case scenario. And the rabbis have a lot of interpretations of that law, basically divide it up, and so that the first case of intercourse is really what they consider the non-marital case of intercourse, and then any subsequent intercourse has to be within the bounds of marriage, according her the full rights of marriage, basically converting her and turning her into a regular wife. I'm not saying there are not still ethical problems with this behavior, but I do think the rabbis are pushing towards a far higher level of ethical behavior, and it's also good to remember that this law is something that they're interpreting but not practicing. In other words, rabbis are interested in interpreting laws of the Torah such that they better meet their own ethics, even if these laws are not practiced anymore. Right? They don't just say, well, we don't practice this anymore and therefore we're not going to worry about it so much. They imbue the Torah with their ethical values even when there's no practical significance to those halachot. It's something that appears, for instance, with the death penalty. It appears with these laws of slaves. We've seen it over and over again. And again, most of these laws are not practiced by rabbis in the rabbinic period. We'll move into the laws of Kiddushin that are practiced and acquisitions that are practiced, but not the laws of Hebrew slavery and certainly not the laws of taking a female beautiful woman captive on the battlefield.